Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Right Here, Right Queer podcast. Today, I will be your host. My name is Carolina Cruz, and with me today, I have Sebastian Nothwell.
Hello.
Hello. Today, we're talking about what one might call one of your lesser-known works, The Haunting...
My most unloved child.
Yes. The one that's kind of that one meme of the skeleton drowning in the pool. It's like all of your works, and then there's Haunting of Heatherhurst Hall.
There she is at the bottom of the pool.
There she is.
Oh, no.
Underrated, I think I would say, but of course it's the only one I've read so far.
Very kind of you to say so.
To be completely honest with you, before we start talking about it, back when we first met and I was first following you on Instagram, you post memes of your stories pretty frequently. And the one that hooked my interest genuinely right away was Heatherhurst Hall. It might be because of lesbians, because...
I mean, you know...
I really do love lesbians, and I do love Crimson Peak very much, so it caught my eye. So when the opportunity came to be able to interview you about it, I jumped on it, so I'm very excited.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be talking to someone, one, who's read it, and two, who enjoyed it.
I would say what isn't there to enjoy, but just, I suppose people could find something. Let's get into it then. My very first question is, what inspired you to write The Haunting of Heatherhurst Hall?
What the hell did inspire me to write this? Well, I think it's fairly obvious from looking at the Ding Dang thing that I found the 2015 Del Toro film Crimson Peak very inspiring.
Yes, I think I definitely picked up on that a little bit.
So I saw the trailer for it before it came out, and I was instantly entranced and immediately came up with 3 different ways the premise could play out.
And what are those 3 different ways? Because I'm curious. I also had preconceived notions going into that movie, and I'm curious if they line up.
My first hypothesis was that the mysterious siblings were vampires. Because there are a lot of, in the trailer, a lot of shots of them outside in sunglasses under black parasols.
Yes.
Just looking absolutely miserable in the sunlight. My second hypothesis was that the siblings themselves were ghosts or some other kind of like ancient spirit whose life essences were tied to the titular property. So like had to keep luring people back to the house to like feed it or like ensure that someone was living in the house so they could continue living or something. And the third hypothesis was what became The Haunting of Heatherhurst Hall.
And the real movie was none of those things.
The real movie went in a secret fourth way that I love and respect because it's a beautiful film, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed on some levels.
I think a lot of people were. I remember that being the general reception at the time.
Well, it also suffers from the fact that, like, Gothic romances weren't really a thing in the 2010s.
No.
So, like, people who went in expecting a romance were like, ooh, yucky, all of the blood everywhere. And then people who went in expecting a horror film were like, why do they keep kissing? So...
Yeah. No, literally, that does sound completely correct to a lot of what I heard about the movie. Because previous to Crimson Peak, a lot of the, 2000s Gothics were Gothic action.
They were, yeah.
There was horror and there was action, and then the kissing was very Bond girl-esque. So this was definitely more classic and tender. But yeah, I can totally understand why that would inspire you to write something.
I go by Naomi Novik rules, which is her fantasy series Temeraire started as Master and Commander fic.
Oh my god.
Where basically she asked herself the premise of what if the Napoleonic Wars had dragons in them?
Oh yeah.
And she got, several thousand words into it and she was like, this is deviated way too far. I can't post this as fanfic anymore. It's gotta be original fiction. So, once I get to a point where fans of the original would be disappointed or feel like it's out of character, then, okay, we're pivoting and this is now inspired by.
I think that's fair. I think that is a really good way to do it. I did not know those books were Master and Commander fanfic. That's incredible.
They are!
Learn something new every day.
So what were your assumptions about what Crimson Peak would be based on the trailer?
Yeah, I think that definitely the vampire one was a thought that I had. And then I think vampires were definitely the main one that I had latched onto, but I'm just a vampire lover deep down. And also knowing Del Toro's whole the monsters are human and the humans are monsters kind of thing, that's kind of what I was expecting. And he does still manage to do that with what he does.
He does. Now that you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, that really was the way Crimson Peak was always destined to go, huh?
But I wanted vampires. I really did. The first half of the movie, I was convinced.
We all wanted vampires so badly. The house itself oozes blood. Why aren't they vampires?
I just want to talk. I just want to talk to you, Guillermo, please. I want to talk about a lot of things, but specifically that. Moving from fanfiction towards classic literature, there are a lot of references to classic literature in Haunting of Heatherhurst Hall that I picked up on. What made you choose those references? Because there was, I think you mentioned Midsummer Night's Dream, and Carmilla obviously is one you kind of have to in a story like this. Some fairy tales, stuff like that. What made you choose those specific works?
So, Heatherhurst Hall, in terms of writing order, comes on the tail end of all of my other Victorian historicals, which were all male-male romance.
Mm-hmm.
So, for researching them, in addition to, like, my nonfiction research, I was also immersing myself in Victorian fiction. So, like, you know, obviously whenever I came across a passage with two dudes being sus, I was like, okay, set that aside for later. But I also kept coming across a lot of, hey ladies, we're very close friends now, ladies, what's going on, ladies, passages.
There is a lot of that.
It's a lot of that in Victorian fiction. So by the time I got around to writing The Haunting of Heatherhurst Hall, I had a lot of sapphic stuff saved up, and I was just kind of like, right, finally, an outlet, in we go.
That makes sense. I loved the references that you made, specifically the tale that Alex reads Kit and the passages from that, like, absolutely captivated me. I really enjoyed that sequence in general.
The Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti?
Yes. I love that specifically. I was obsessed.
It's a poem that gives a lot of sapphics a lot of feelings, for good reason.
Yeah, I wonder why. I love passion expressed as consumption and eating and such and lifeblood and blah, blah, blah very much. So that was...
Hence the vampires?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit. It's very, very good. We talked a bit about the themes. Are the characters, do they know what they're doing when they keep referencing these things? I got the sense that Alex does when she brings up Carmilla. It felt very sly of her.
Yeah, Alex... being such a huge Carmilla fan, and it goes back to my first book, Mr. Warren's Profession, where one of the heroes has a sister who's just an absolute Titanic lesbian. Who, behind the scenes, is, like, the head of an immense upper-class Victorian lesbian polycule.
Oh, good for her.
But because her brother is an oblivious himbo, he doesn't know that she has one girlfriend, much less all of them.
Oh my god.
So throughout the background of the whole series, she's just, like, to the reader, I think, very obviously... just kind of maintaining these relationships, acquiring new girlfriends.
Oh my god.
So on and so forth. But the one thing she's constantly doing in the background, because her and her brother are both bibliophiles, she is constantly just buying copies of Carmilla.
That's so valid of her.
Which her brother doesn't realize why that's a thing. Like, he read the book, he thought it was okay, he moved on with his life. He has no idea. He doesn't bother to question her about it. He's just like, yep, she loves this book, I guess.
She really loves that book. Oh my god.
So, like, out of his point of view, she is, like, kind of using gifts of that book as, like, flirtation.
That's so fun. That would work on me.
Which is why she has to keep getting more copies. Because she's constantly giving them away to hot girls.
If a woman approached me in public and handed me a copy of Carmilla, I would take that as a marriage proposal, so...
I mean, truly.
I loved that.
So Alex is doing a similar move here.
You know, it's obviously working again.
I don't have any evidence for Carmilla being a sapphic flirtation move in the 1890s, like historically, but I've decided that, like, in the universe of my books, that is true.
I was gonna say, in the Sebastian Nothwell extended universe.
Yes. The Sebastian Nothwell expanded universe.
Oh my god, that's incredible.
Carmilla is calling cards for lesbians.
Someone hands me a copy of Carmilla. I'm like, is this a Sebastian Nothwell reference?
So Alex definitely knows, and for Kit, it's mostly just like, she knows she resonates with these stories for a reason, kind of like the same way I think most queer people know certain stories speak to their own experiences.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Like we talked about recently, Little Women.
Yeah.
And resonating with that. That feels very similar to me.
Little Women is incredible, not just because it's a wildly popular book, but also like the sheer breadth of different queer experiences it speaks to, while being ostensibly an extremely heteronormative work.
Yeah. I do think all these girls meeting one boy and thinking to themselves, okay, that's it. Now I don't have to think about boys ever again because I've met the only boy.
There is that, and there is also just like, you know, ace people relate to Jo March, like butch women relate to Jo March, non-binary people relate to Jo March, trans masc relate to Jo March, like everyone is projecting all of their feelings onto this one character, and God bless her, she stands up under it.
She really does.
Like, she can support all of these readings. She's the every character.
She really is. She's very special that way. No one like her out there.
Truly.
But Kit kind of has that, like, slight subconscious awareness that she's constantly, I love how she, like, Alex is very overt, like, kind of flagging of Kit, and then Kit being like, read me this really homoerotic poem, please, for no reason.
Hello, I'm delirious with fever and laudanum. Could you read me this poem specifically? Beautiful woman who's trapped in this house with me?
For no reason.
For no reason. I just have a lot of feelings and I have nowhere to put them anyway.
Surely this poem will fix me. Oh, I love her so much. Speaking of Kit, one of the things that I noticed a few changes of Crimson Peak specifically. One of them is obviously...
I should hope so, because otherwise I'm in big trouble.
Some of them were like, well, this just makes sense. And then some of them are like, this is a deliberate choice that intrigues me. One of them was making Charlie Hunnam's character into a woman, which I appreciate. I was talking about Heatherhurst Hall to some friends, and I mentioned that change, and the response was universal. Charlie Hunnam's in Crimson Peak? These are... all people who have watched the movie.
I gotta be honest, when you said it just now, I did have that moment of, oh yeah! He's there.
He is there. He's very much there, but only for a little bit.
He's easily one of the people who's there.
Yeah. But other than that, which I did appreciate, the one thing that I really picked up on was in Crimson Peak, the main character is a writer. And it's kind of a cliche for any creative to make the main character of their work have the same hobby as them. I think it's always funny when it happens because it gives the creator an excuse to wax philosophical about writing. But you made a change where Kit is actually super into photography. I have two questions about that. One, why photography? And two, is that something that you already had some knowledge of? You mentioned doing research for other Victorian era stories at the time. Did that come up already, or is this something you did research into specifically for this story?
So why photography is because, first off, writing about writers really annoys me.
That's so funny.
It's so hard because, like, if your character has any other hobby, you can just research the hobby, you can talk to people who have the hobby, you can watch videos, you can just research, immerse yourself in it, and then describe with your words the best version of that hobby, and it'll be fine, and the reader will believe that they're great at it, and that they love it, and that they have a good time at it, and suspension of disbelief is maintained.
Mm-hmm.
If you are writing about a writer... at a certain point, the reader is going to expect to read this character's writing.
Yes.
And then you are going to be in big, big trouble.
Yes.
Because it's going to either be very obvious that your writer character writes exactly like the prose surrounding their excerpts, or it is going to be very obviously not as good as every other character in the book is pretending it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely a huge fear I had in writing a musician character, and the time came where I had to write the songs the character was writing. And I was like, everyone says they're so good, and I am not a poet. But I did my best, and I've heard they're fine, so I'm feeling okay about that. But yeah, no, I wonder why it's such a cliche when that obvious issue is right there.
So, I have read it going so poorly so many times.
Genuinely, yeah.
But, like, again, calling back to Little Women, Jo March is a writer, just like Louisa May Alcott is a writer, obviously. But we don't ever see passages of Jo's writing in Little Women, I don't think. I do not recall.
I don't remember that either, so if we're both wrong, sorry.
If we're both wrong, oops, gotta go back to Concord House.
Oopsie daisy.
Gotta go back to the Orchard House in Concord, get my head on straight. But, and I think that's why it's easy to believe that Jo has a career in writing, that her writing is successful, that her writing is popular. And I think it also helps that the dude Jo eventually marries, spoilers for Little Women, reads her writing and says, you can do better.
Yeah, I think that is a big part of it, is that no one ever really says she's amazing so much as she loves what she's doing very much, and she reacts very naturally to rejection and to her work being destroyed and whatever. So I never felt like there was an unnatural expectation for her to be very good.
Yeah.
You know, just that she was very passionate.
Yes.
Versus a lot of these, the way that these authors are written, it's like every author Stephen King writes, where it's like, and then he turned into an award-winning screenwriter, but he had one flaw, and it's the thing people criticize me for.
And then he got hit by a van.
And then he
Oh, God.
But photography.
Photography. So I definitely knew I didn't want to write a writer. And as to why photography specifically, again, based on the trailer for Crimson Peak, I thought that photography was going to play a way bigger role in the story.
That's so fair. Also, the machine. There's a lot of things that you think are going to play a much bigger role in the story that just don't, that you took and incorporated into the actual plot of Heatherhurst Hall, that I do appreciate.
Hey, every expectation you had based on the Crimson Peak trailer, I promise the Haunting of Heatherhurst Hall delivers.
I put that on the back of the book.
The machine, the absolute wasted shot of the Chekhov's gun that was the machine.
It's such a cool machine.
So upset. They turn it on in the last 10 minutes for no reason.
For no reason.
No reason.
I think that script needed one more rework. And that rework was The Haunting of Heatherhurst Hall.
Del Toro, please, I just want to talk.
Oh, jeez Louise. Photography.
Photography. So, spirit photography in the 19th century was such a huge deal because photography is this new technology that we have. We can capture an image as we see it. Incredible. Except the camera, much like our own human eyes, has flaws. Or, perhaps, these are strengths. Because now you can do what is called a double exposure, which is you take one photograph, you do not change the plate or the film or anything, and you take another photograph directly over it, and then you get two images transposed over each other. Ooh, spooky.
Ooh.
There was a fairly famous incident in Boston in the late 1800s where you had a spirit medium who was doing spirit photography, taking photos of people like, ooh, if you come to my photo studio, I'll take a photo with you, and then we'll know like what spirits are like lurking around you, and I'll tell you like stories about them and who they were. And this worked great until people started noticing that the ghosts in the photograph looked a lot like living people who were currently walking the streets of Boston.
That's so funny.
Who had perhaps maybe just been hired to come into the studio for photographs earlier, in particular clothes and poses.
That's incredible. You just can't pull a scam like that these days.
Oh, you can, but it's not as fun.
Genuinely.
So I wanted to give Kit a creative hobby that would in some way make it easier for her to solve her little ghost mystery. I say little ghost mystery, it's a pretty big ghost mystery.
It's a sizable ghost mystery, all things considered.
It's a fair-sized ghost mystery she's up against. But photography gives her a creative outlet, which I feel, this is perhaps shallow of me, I find it very difficult to relate to protagonists that I'm writing if they don't also have a creative outlet.
I'm right there with you. It's Genuinely, it's really hard.
Like, what are they passionate about?
So they've got to be passionate. Like, they can even be like a scientist or a doctor, and it's like, I don't know much about that, but as long as they can be fascinated by something.
Yeah, they have to really, really care about something. They have to let it drive them, you know?
100%.
For Kit, until she, meets women, that is photography.
There's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and women in photography are right next to each other on that.
Absolutely, yes. And as far as researching it was concerned, I had some background because, spoiler alert, I went to school for illustration, so I had to take a lot of design courses and art history courses, and photography was wrapped up in that because, in art history you have to figure out, why did everyone start making paintings so weird? Around the same time the camera appeared. Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
That really opened up the possibilities for everybody. So I had a little background information on the history of photography through that, and then everything else I owe to Tumblr user Vimy Vickers, who answered my cry for help on May 9th of 2018. I have an exact date because they answered my question in a Tumblr reblog.
Oh, thank God for Tumblr strangers.
And they linked me to the 1893 book Amateur Photography, A Practical Guide for the Beginner by Washington Irving Lincoln Adams.
Wow.
I can't believe that's his real name.
That's quite the name. That's like all of the names.
Every name. And it's available for free on archive.org, which meant that, like a lot of Victorian research, it was so smooth and easy for me. I love how obsessed the Victorians were with documenting themselves.
I appreciate it, honestly.
It's made it very easy to research them. They're like just on the cusp of recent enough that most of what they produce hasn't yet rotted away. It was made recently enough that it could be digitized before it disappeared. But it's still like just far away enough that a 21st century person looks back and goes, what the hell are you doing?
Literally.
How do you live like this?
Finding all of the different little, like back when I was really trying to write Victorian and Edwardian fantasy and fiction, finding the like catalogs of things that maybe we don't have anymore, but that they totally bought. And it's like, wait, you were putting mustache guards on cups? That's really smart, actually. I can't fault you for that one.
I love mustache cups so much. They're so cute.
They're really cute. But speaking of that, is there anything that you found out while researching for this book, or something like a scene or anything that didn't make it into the book itself for this one?
Not really, which is part of what made this project specifically so freeing, just because, like, I got to throw absolutely everything into the cauldron. Like, I got spirit photography and industrial accidents and the constant repurposing of English architecture stretching back to the age of the Viking invasions, and particularly during Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries. Like, I got to get in the New England vampire panics and the Lizzie Borden mystery and the Newport mansions and all the sapphic 19th century literature I'd collected. So, like, everything in the kitchen sink is in there, including 2 of my favorite creepypastas.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I noticed the Viking stuff. I love how interesting England's history is on the front of having been invaded and such. I got the opportunity to go to Bath, and seeing all that Roman architecture in England is really weird, but very, very cool.
Extremely cool.
It's like, that's just a thing that happened. People from Rome were there, and they were gonna stay there.
They stayed there for a bit, they built a wall, they left.
Good for them. But yeah, no, I loved how... I feel like the word self-indulgent has become like a curse to utter about a book or a work. People see it pretty much overwhelmingly as like a negative thing, but I love it when you can read something and tell that a writer or a creator was having fun and really excited to like include things and share them with the reader or the audience. And I definitely felt that way reading it.
Yeah, the fun is contagious. Like, when you can tell an author really, really enjoyed either this particular detail or this character arc, or just like, I feel like readers can tell when you're not having fun writing something, or when you find what you're writing boring, because it comes across as boring and it reads boring and you're bored reading it. So like, when you can tell an author really, really loves it, it's
fun and it's special.
Like, here's the thing. Repo the Genetic Opera is not good.
Repo the Genetic Opera?
But it's fun.
It's so fun. It really is.
It's so indulgent and so stupid and so fun.
I was just telling my spouse about that because he thought that Repo and Repo the Genetic Opera were two different things. He thought that Repo was the initial work and the Repo the Genetic Opera was like a musical adaptation of that.
Oh, no.
And he found out it's just a musical. And he's a self-proclaimed musical hater, even though that's not true. He made me watch The Music Man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Of all the ones.
Yeah.
Damn.
We're not here to slander my husband, but...
I'm so sorry.
But he deserves it. That said, Repo the Genetic Opera, when I tell people about it, I'm like, I cannot say that it is good in any way. I cannot listen to most of this. I wish I could because they're fun, but the dialogue is so choppy and straightforward that if it weren't for the costumes and the actual tunes of the songs and the set design and everything, I don't think I'd like it very much based just on the writing. But everything else is so fun and over the top that it makes up for it.
Every actor just gnawing on every inch of the repurposed scenery that was built for different films.
Anthony Head. Who put him in there? Whose idea was it to have Anthony Head being the Repo Man? And why does he eat it up?
Because he is a treasure.
He really is. This is a little off topic of the questions that I had prepared, but it's something I was curious about because I obviously know this has its roots in Crimson Peak. Did you imagine the characters pretty much as they appear in Crimson Peak, or did you have like different like actors in mind or just different facial features in mind? It struck me how you described the siblings. They don't sound like Jessica Chastain and Tom Hiddleston to me when they're described as much.
They're really not. I wanted to give them more just kind of like Corvid features.
Yeah.
Just because, like, one, I think beaky noses are beautiful, and two, like...
Yes. Underrated.
Seriously underrated. And also I wanted to have them, like, very ominous English raven vibe. Just kind of, like, descending on this sunny American seaside town and just being their gothic selves. And also just, like... Yeah, Alex in the book is notably smaller and slighter, and in the way that a lot of short women I've known are kind of like, you don't notice they're short upon meeting them, or maybe even after living with them for 6 months, you don't realize they're short until you see them start like a fight with several 6-foot-tall men.
And you're like, oh damn.
And win, and then you're like, oh... You're actually rather small, and we are going to have to keep a better eye on you at parties because you keep bloodying noses. Okay.
That's definitely because she is such a big personality and takes on all of these things. I definitely forgot she was short.
In the same way, I have forgotten a lot of my female friends are short because I don't know what this is, but there's something about short women where they will absolutely destroy someone.
Yeah.
They are not shrinking violets by any sense of the phrase.
No, I'm the tallest person at the place where I work. It's definitely the vibes of, like, I'm like a Saint Bernard and they're all, like, Jack Russell Terriers and Chihuahuas and, like, ratting dogs.
Yes.
That will, like, in the most complimentary way possible. If there is a customer who is a problem, they're going to be the ones who say something before me, 9 times out of 10. And I'll just be there like, oh, guys, are you sure? Is there not a more amicable way we could solve this? And I appreciate them because I'm scared.
Yes. Short women have saved my ass more times than I can count.
So many times. Thank you. If you're out there listening.
Thus, Alex is a short woman.
It fits her. I love it very much.
Short women, if you're out there.
Short woman, if you're listening.
And then Kit is likewise a very tall, statuesque woman because I have known so many just massive, soft butches.
Mm-hmm.
Who are very, very gentle and sweet and could also, you know, throw me over their shoulder. And, like...
Yeah.
It is, in a weird way, just kind of an ode to many women I have admired.
That's so valid. Rest in peace, Kit. You would have loved flannels.
She would have loved flannels and not really understood why. It would have taken her a minute. She would have just been like, yeah, a Subaru is just a really practical vehicle and I love hiking, so...
I just have so many keys. That's why he's a carabiner, that's all.
Yeah, it's just practical. Like,
It's just practical.
a purse is gonna get in the way, and like, the carabiner goes with my flannel for reasons I'm not going to examine. Anyway,
I love kits so very much.
Anyway, yes, I will absolutely follow this woman I've just met into a cemetery. What of it?
What of it? Oh my god, I love them both so much. We're getting into spoiler territory now for our listeners. This last question does in fact spoil the kind of ending of this book, so I'm going to recommend that you go and read it and then come back and listen to this part.
It's my shortest book, I promise.
It's nice and short and sweet and good, and you should read it. Yay. So, because we talked earlier about the vampire element of Crimson Peak, that makes it even more surprising that that is not the direction that you took this. You ended this almost entirely without supernatural occurrences being real at all. It's a very practical ending. What made you decide to kind of reject the other takes that you could have gone with?
So, the secret third way that I thought the Crimson Peak would play out based on the trailer was, I was like, oh, he's got a horrible secret, and the sister's got a horrible secret, and the husband won't have sex with the wife. So clearly, both siblings are gay, and like, he won't have sex with her because he's not interested in women, and she keeps, delicately caressing her cheek with a dying butterfly because what the hell?
Oh, come on. What else? Why else would she do that?
What possible reason is there for that if you are not trying to make out with her? Honestly. So when the reveal was incest, I was at best disappointed.
At best, definitely is a generous way to put it.
It was very strange because, like, everyone else I was talking to was like, yeah, I guess the twist from, like, the trailer, like, it's such an obvious. I'm like, is it though? Is everyone else's brain skipping straight to incest at all time? Am I really the odd man out here?
See, that's a question that I asked myself too, because I saw a lot of people talk about Gothic fiction and incest. And when it comes to Gothic stuff for me, I guess most of what I read is like the classic horror stories, the like big ones that people talk about, right? So like Poe and Frankenstein and Jekyll and Hyde and yada yada yada. And very few of those have incest. Or imply incest, I guess, even, because I'm thinking like House Usher as a story, and I can't really think of that many others. But I get the vibes from conversations surrounding it. So this is me showing my hand as someone who is ignorant of a genre that I, in theory, really love. So my apologies to the listeners who thought I was some kind of expert. I get the vibe that there's a lot more incest in Gothics than I thought there was.
Maybe we are just somehow magically skipping over all.
Yeah, we're like missing the incest somehow. Because, someone posted on Twitter that a Gothic without incest is like food without spice. And I was like, huh?
Is it though?
I guess, maybe.
Is it?
Feel free to tell us in the comments on Instagram on this one. Because I
feel free to get everyone banned from Instagram by discussing.
You make sure that you TikTok censor yourself. But yeah, I don't know. That's something I'm just not really sure about. So I'm really glad to hear that I'm not the only one.
So the third way that I thought Crimson Peak would go would be both siblings gay.
Obviously.
And knowing that, I didn't really want to complicate it with too much else. And then, like...
That's fair.
The short version of why this isn't a story with ghosts in it is because I personally have seen what the paranormal hunting community calls a full-bodied apparition. And I still don't believe in ghosts. So... It's one of those things that's just very difficult for me personally to suspend my disbelief. Because, like, if I say, okay, ghosts are real in my book, that implies a lot of world building. And one fun fact about me is that I hate world building.
You're so valid. Me too, bestie.
It's exhausting. It's obnoxious. The only thing worse than having to do my own world building is having someone else's world building explained to me. I found Dune very tedious.
With Blood in the Water, I kind of assumed that you have at least a passing familiarity of the Demeter section of Dracula, because I didn't want to get into all that. I've had people be like, what happened before? And I'm like, if you can't figure it out, I don't know what to tell you, because I don't want to world build the vampires. Just like, let's all be on the same page about this for a second here.
Yeah, do you know what a vampire is? Do you know what a boat is? Good, you have all you need to know. Let's go. Let's get to the story. So, like, yeah, I didn't want to snarl everything up and bog it down with, like, metaphysical questions of the afterlife or what have you. Like, I don't care, and you can't make me care.
That's so valid. And I think it makes it really interesting in this case because you put all the pieces in place. And then by the time that it's all revealed, it's like, oh yeah, it's one of those things where I did have the pieces to figure it out ahead of time if I had wanted to think that hard. As it was, I mentioned this in my Goodreads review, but I definitely was like a couple steps ahead of the characters, which I think you wrote very well. I do not think I was putting pieces together faster than you wrote them. I think as you mentioned things, I was like, oh fuck, here we go. And then seconds later, the characters were like, oh fuck. So...
Oh no. Yeah, I did. It does kind of play into Kit's obliviousness for her own feelings for women and what that might mean for her. It does extend to her obliviousness towards ghosts and whether or not they're real. Because, like, there is a point where she talks to a guy she thinks is a ghost and physically reaches out and touches him.
You know.
And, like, rationalizes it away in her brain as, like, oh, I can touch him, but he feels cold because he's dead. It's just like,
yes,
no,
it's very cute. It's very good. I love retroactively the fact that the two of them thought the other was a ghost and were totally ready to accept that.
Both of them were instantly like, okay, ghosts are real and I'm seeing one. Now moving forward.
Vivian and Alex have a type. And it's people who are way too willing to believe in ghosts.
Truly. Truly.
I loved that so much. I also loved their first actual conversation with each other. Where they're just like, oh, wait, hey, wait a minute. You're real. Anyway, how's it going?
I'm so delighted you're real.
That's good. I really thought ghosts were real for a second there, but now that I don't have to examine that, let's figure out what happened.
Yeah.
I loved that personally. I know that that's a decision that maybe other people would be let down by, but I was let down by incest, so this is way better than that.
My greatest hope is that someone reads The Haunting of Heatherhurst Hall and is disappointed that the ghosts aren't real and goes on to write a third story.
Crimson Peakception.
Yes.
That would be really funny. But yeah, no, overall, I just really loved the whole story. I'm glad that I finally got around to reading it, honestly, and I hope more people do.
Thank you.
I think it definitely is the most against brand TM compared to the rest of your stuff.
Here's the thing. It's probably very obvious from how I approach quote-unquote marketing. I really do not understand my brand, because, like, here's the thing. Gory, grotesque, industrial accidents is my brand.
Mm-hmm.
People with their insides becoming their outsides and having to cope with that really is my brand.
And it's really interesting, and I love reading it.
So, I feel like this is just the one where I just labeled it horror, is the difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same thing that's happening in every other book, only this time I just said, right, it's horror.
It's got the most, like, from the vibes, because it is Gothic, and so when you think of that, when you think of curling up in the fall and reading a book, picking something that has haunting in the title and is set in a big fuck-off mansion definitely fits that, but, you know.
I think it's also very obvious that I grew up watching This Old House just from Kit's approach to moving into a haunted mansion.
I love her so much. She's so ready for just everything, and none of it is what's actually happening. I love her thought process of, I'll marry this man, and that way I'll get to be around his hot sister, and we'll live happily ever after. And then that's not Alex's immediate reaction. She's like, oh man, Alex must have hated me this whole time.
In many ways, she is very intelligent, but in some certain key areas, she's just not quite.
I love her so very, very much. I don't know. The rest of this could just be me gushing. I really enjoyed a lot of the character dynamics and stuff. So I was really, yeah, I don't know. And the writing style and everything. So this is me telling you, the listener, to read this one, please.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about this story?
I am curious, at the risk of being ridiculously self-indulgent regarding an already very self-indulgent project, were you able to pick up on which two creepypastas inspired?
Oh my god. Inspired. No, I don't think so. I was not a very big internet person back in the day, so I was a very, very sheltered child. That's why I've read so many classic horror novels and no creepypastas.
For you and the listener, I will say Skin All White, Eyes All Red inspired the sequence where Kit looks through the lock and sees another human eye staring back at her.
Mm-hmm.
And Man Door Hand Hook Car Door.
Man Door Hand Hook Car Door
is the reason that Gertie has a hook for her hand.
That's so funny, because I do know Man Car Hook Hand Car Door.
Okay, the other thing is, like, I am such a scaredy cat that there is at least one person who has recorded Mandor Hand Hook Car Door, but, like, completely straight-laced, like, in a spooky voice with spooky background music, and I only got, like, 10 seconds into it before I had to turn it off because I got too freaked out.
That's so funny.
It's the stupidest. For those of you who don't, those of you who aren't terminally online, Mandor Handhook Car Door is a very garbled, lost in translation version of the classic teens necking out in the car in the woods are menaced by a guy with a hook for a hand, but the grammar and syntax and spelling have broken down so far that it's almost unintelligible. And it's very funny, particularly if you try to read it aloud, just like as written without making any mistakes or laughing.
That one, and then Who Was Phone?
Then Who Was Phone? Honest to God, if this were set 20 years later, then Who Was Phone would have made an appearance.
That would have sent me over the edge, I think, so.
Although, I guess Crimson Peak had wax cylinder recordings, so we could have had Then Who Was Phonograph. But
we could have, and you didn't do it, so.
Well,
I actually take back everything I said.
This book was a failure. Back to the drawing board.
Try again. Oh my gosh. All right. Anyway, this has been a very, I'm thank you for answering my questions. It feels really, it's good fun to read a good book and then be able to get answers to those gnawing questions about inspiration and such. So thank you for answering.
Thank you for reading the book and asking the questions, because I cannot stress enough that you are the first and only person to ask questions.
Well, hopefully there will be many more after this. This very serious podcast episode.
It's very serious.
Very. Definitely no creepypasta references here. Where can people find you in the meantime, Sebastian?
They can find me and links to all my books and links to all my social media at sebastiannothwell.com.
Yeah, you go. Great. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to having you back for another roundtable and/or interview soon.
Yes, me too.